guys, I'm back with another episode of my interview series, and today I have with me the ever effervescent Lynne Jensen Lampe. Lynne Jensen Lampe is a writer based in Columbia, Missouri. Her poems have been appeared or are forthcoming from Figure One, Only Magazine, Yemesi, Moist Poetry Journal, and elsewhere. Her chapbook Talk Smack to a Hurricane is also coming from Ice Flow Press this year. Her poem Stirring the Ashes was a finalist for the 2020 Red Wheelbarrow Poetry Prize. She lives with her musician husband and two dogs in mid Missouri, where she edits academic books and journals. So let's welcome Lynn. Hi,
Hi.
how are you? I'm so happy to finally see you.
Me too. It's nice to put a face with all of our Twitter correspondence. So, and also if you hear some barking, we've got two dogs and they're a little noisy.
That's completely alright. I mean, I know that you have dogs. We are going to talk about them as well in the later segment of this
Okay.
interview. Okay. And I just want to ask you that how did your journey as a writer begin, and what were the humble beginnings? So could you please tell me that?
Um, I I I feel that I've been thinking about this a lot because I at first I thought, oh, I didn't start till I was in junior high, which was maybe, 12 or 13 years old. But then I remembered that my grandfather really loved wordplay and puns, and he used to tell limericks at the table. And and so I got really interested in limericks, and he had this big book by a poet and writer Ogden Nash, who wrote all these comedic poems. And so I think I actually started writing limericks when I was in elementary and just really got interested in words. And then, we had different class assignments. Um, so I still have somewhere the one of my class assignments from fourth or fifth grade, which was to write a Sankan, which I think is 5 lines. I haven't written one probably since then. Um, and then the rest of it was, being a teenager and having issues I wanted to work out and insecurities and starting to journal, and then the journals became poems, and that was the start of it.
That's really lovely. I mean, I have talked to a lot of writers, and I don't know anybody so far who has started their journey from limerick. So, wow, that sounds so much fun. So, as you were talking about limerick, so now how do you approach it after like years of experience and tons of publications? Do you still respect the form, or do you focus more on the emotional side of poetry?
Every so often I do try form. I am still trying to write a pantoum and a villanelle. I've managed to I actually wrote a double sestina for a class I was taking, and that was actually published in Anti-Heroin Chic. And I was so excited that somebody wanted it. I just loved it. And uh, but mostly though, I don't write formal verse, although I am very conscious of form. So as far as, does this poem need couplets, tercets? Where are the line breaks? Do I want to go, count syllables or that sort of thing? And the other thing is when I have um, trouble getting started with something, I'll write limericks. And although I write what they call grimericks, so they're macabre or sort of dark humor, and those kinds of things just sort of loosens up my imagination. So I do use a form to get me started on the things that are more emotional.
Wow, that's really, really interesting because not a lot of people start with poems, when they are penning down their poems or, just putting down their ideas on paper. So I think that's really, really unique quality of yours as a writer. You talked about double sestina. I think it's really, really difficult. So, hats off to you. And you talked about getting it published in Anti-Heroine magazine. So, could you please tell me that when exactly did you feel like submitting your work to journals? Because I know that it takes a lot of courage to put your work out there for people to read. So, when did you realize that now it's the time to do that?
Hmm. Uh, I have a feeling, well, I know when it was. Okay. So I was saying that I'm old and I'm going to be 63 in a couple of weeks. And so I started writing poetry and submitting right around college, and that was when you still sent snail mail and the rejections came snail mail. And so I did send a couple of things in, and most, the journals I sent to are long gone, except for my very first published poem was in 17 magazine when I was in high school, and that was very exciting, and they paid me and everything. Um, and then I I I took honorable mention in a literary contest. And then after that, I really didn't write for a long time till 2015. And I started taking classes, and I was in a critique group here in Columbia, and just not a big group, and people with a lot of different experiences with poetry. And one of the people was Walter Bargan, who's the first poet laureate of the state of Missouri. And he was in this group, and he started encouraging me, sort of saying, now it's time, your work is ready to go out. And so I started sending out, and um, uh, developed a thick skin, and just have kept going. But it's so different, not not using the snail mail and all of that, because everything's so fast, and your opportunities for rejection come very quickly. But I enjoy it. I enjoy, and it's fun to research and learn about new poets and new journals. And I've found a lot of new poets through doing, looking up different journals to see if my work would be a good fit.
Wow, first of all, I want to clap for you. I mean, getting paid, getting paid in a high school, and wow, I mean, that's so much like that's so exciting. I wish I knew you then. I mean, so I would have hugged you and congratulated you. This is such an amazing feat. I mean, getting published and then getting paid for it, and that too in high school. So like, wow. Okay, so now that you have spoken about how did you get to start sending your work to journals. So how was your experience like after getting published in like in high school, and then getting all those rejections, and then with the process of submission being entirely changed, like earlier it was the snail mail, now it's submittable and email and stuff like that. So how do you see it now? Has it impacted your process of writing in any way?
Mm. Boy, has it impacted my writing process. I'm not sure, because my goals as a writer are different now. When I was younger, I had this dream of being a big poet and being famous. Like, even famous poets aren't necessarily, it's not like famous, you know what I mean? They're big in our world, or in the world of literature. Um, and so I think I didn't focus properly on my writing. I think that the acceptances I had when I was younger might have been a fluke, just that I came up with something that was good, and I did work on my poetry. I did revise, but nothing like I revise now. And I think that the challenge with electronic submissions is to not let go of the work too soon. Um, I I don't I think if I had to snail mail everything, I probably wouldn't have as many publications. Um, it would take longer. It's just the it's more of a daunting process. Um, so I think that what's happening is now is I have more opportunities to send in, but yet I still have to be really careful to revise. And now I'll, if I have to revise, 50 times, I will. Yeah, and then you have those poems that you send out, 37 times, and finally someone takes it, you know, and I no way would I send something out in the mail 37 times. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, that's really like you have summed it up really well that the time has shortened. Now it's like a week or more like 6 months that you get a response. Earlier, I'm sure that it must be tough to get a response from a journal. So, you have talked about your process of revision that it has been evolved over the period of years. So, could you please share on what sort of evolution has your work been through now? Compared to before? Like, how do you revise your work now, uh, compared to when you were, starting as a young poet? How has it changed?
Mm-hmm. Um, I pay attention to more aspects of the poem. Um, I think before well, one uh, one thing I always work for now that I didn't think of previously is the emotional truth of the poem. And I feel that each poem has a truth, and my job is to work at it until I find what that is. So sort of like a sculptor, forming something and chipping away. It's very obvious when a sculpture when it's not finished, or the blocks just barely taking a different form. And so now I so I do it different ways. I have this, in fact, I was talking about this with someone yesterday. I get this feeling inside myself in my body where I can tell if I've gotten to the truth or I'm not being honest with myself. I can tell when I'm sort of cutting corners and not digging deep enough. And it might be a story that's not even about me, but I feel that. The other thing is I'm much more conscious of different um, of the things that make a poem stronger, help it communicate on more levels or deeper levels, like having something in the ending reflecting something in the beginning, or looking for different connections, or sounds of words that, if I need a peaceful sound or an abrupt or angry sound, how to put words together to think about that. And so I think I had a very superficial process before, where I was aware that craft was something to strive for, but didn't have um, I didn't have the well, I didn't have the guidance to do revision really. I mean, I had excellent teachers, and I took a couple of poetry classes in college, workshops, and I had excellent instructors, but I do not remember much being said about revision. Although I would get comments on, people give you feedback, but I don't recall someone this technique or that technique. I have one technique that I learned in a class that I took with Ed Skoog, and it was to alphabetize the lines of the poem, and sometimes by the first word, and sometimes you find different connections that you didn't know were there. And I haven't tried it with a poem longer than 30 lines or so because it's too cumbersome. But I really have found new directions for poems based on that alphabetical order. So it's interesting.
Wow, that's really insightful. So, you have really talked about your, your way of writing, like how, you have to be very careful that be honest with yourself that you are not cutting corners and really digging deep into the subject. So, I know it's not easy. I mean, because with poetry there is a lot of craft, there is a lot of thought involved, and your truth is just with you, and you have to put it there on the paper for everybody to understand and feel the same way, the way you feel about it. And sometimes things get lost in translation, or you are not really able to convey what is there in your heart. So
Mm-hmm.
have you ever faced this, and if yes, then how do you deal with this?
Um, well, I think being in groups with other writers or having other writers, other poets read my work when it's in draft form is invaluable. I'm really, really fortunate to be in two different um, feedback groups. One is in person and one is online. And the online one, well, actually, both of them have gone on for years. And the one online is with three other women. Um, and we share a poem every month. Well, it's just so helpful because somebody will tell me what they think the poem says, and it's not what I mean, or they'll mention some confusion, and and that gives me an idea. And then sometimes, some once you finish a poem and the reader reads it, then the reader puts in, you know, develops their own meanings for things. I mean, you can't control what a person reading a journal is going to think. Well, one thing that happened with one poem that still isn't finished, um, I I had these few lines that related to baptism, truly baptism, the actual head dunking baptism. Well, because of other things in the poem, the people in my group thought I was talking about sex. And I said, okay, I absolutely do not want this to be construed as sexual, so I'm changing the words. Now, if they had said, oh, it had this, we thought it was about sex, and I thought, oh, wow, that's really a great second meaning. I'm so glad, I would have left it alone. So it was really good to have that perspective and then evaluate for myself, do I like that or do I not? And then make a change accordingly.
That's really interesting that you talked about that. No matter how many people are going to read your work, everybody is going to differently interpret it. And obviously, being a writer, you don't know how a reader is going to approach it, because everybody is going to approach a different your poem in a different way and treat it differently. So how difficult it is for you to get your truth out, to be extremely yourself amid these things, because it's really difficult, because at the end of the day what you want to convey might not be understood by a lot of people. Maybe 50, 60 people understand, but not everybody understand it. So how do you manage to just keep yourself going, knowing that this is a possibility? Because as much as I'm knowing you, I realize that you are a very passionate and a very perfectionist sort of a poet. So I can completely understand that how difficult it must be for you. So could you please, elaborate on that?
Um, it's really funny that you mentioned about being a perfectionist poet, and I laugh because I think that was the problem when I was younger. I think part of me thought if it didn't come out almost perfect, what's the point? And now I think nothing is perfect, and I just keep working at it. I do finally realize that it's okay if not everybody gets the poem. Um, yeah. For one thing, people aren't always going to like the topic or the style. It might not speak to them. Maybe it's doesn't tell enough of a story, or it's too much on the emotional end of things. I I do find that it's easier for me to feel very honest. I don't even know if honest is a word you can modify. Maybe it's like unique. It either is or isn't. Um, but I find myself driven to be honest when I'm writing. I try to be honest in my personal communication with people, but when it's written down and I can look at it, I feel an extra responsibility to be honest. So I just keep chipping away at it. And, like I said, I get people to read it and see if how closely their interpretation matches mine. And then I just have to let it go. And maybe it'll be something I decide to send out. Maybe it's something that's just for me. I've just, in the last couple of years, gotten to the point of knowing that I might work really hard and polish a poem, and it's still something that's just for me. It's not meant to go out in the world. Um, and that was actually kind of hard because I kept seeing all these people submitting, and I thought, well, I can't just keep this back to myself because I don't have anything to send in. But then I reminded myself that's not even really the point.
Thank you so much for talking on this subject, because I can completely relate and understand what you are saying, because it's really difficult at times to to actually just be yourself, and regardless of knowing that not everybody is going to understand you, or your subject matter is not for everybody to to cherish or to enjoy. So like, hats off to you for coming to this realization, because it's really really tough, and I feel that after talking to you, I'll also have some sort of realization. Okay, so now let's talk about the sort of themes that you incorporate in your writing. So could you please talk about that? What sort of themes have you so far employed in your work and are planning to do in the future?
Mhm. Mostly, I've noticed that the themes in my work relate quite a bit to conformity. How important is it to conform? What does it mean to conform? Um, does uh, conformity is conformity required to be sane? I'm dealing a lot with this fear I had as a child and most of my adulthood, that I saw my mother's severe mental health condition and wondered if that would be me too. And so a lot of my poetry deals with what is sanity and what is our measure of it, and what happens when there is medical or psychological intervention. I turns out a lot of my poetry ends up being about sex and God, which was never my intention. Because well, I say personal things in my poetry that I would never say in public. I think a lot of us do that actually. I mean, I do end up saying it in public because I'm reading my poems. And regardless of the pronouns you use, first person, second person, they still, readers just assume it's about you. I'm pretty sure. But faith is one of those things where, and I've noticed this with a lot of artists, it doesn't seem to matter how devout a person is, or what particular religion they're in. And maybe, I'm speaking as someone living in the US, so maybe part of it is the symbolism and the national holidays being the same as some religious holidays, but I notice a lot of religious references, usually Christian. And in writing these poems about my mom for this book, I started writing more. I grew up Jewish, so I'm writing a lot more about Judaism. That seems to be a theme: Judaism and anti-Semitism. I in the future, I have a desire to write about the natural world more, nature. The funny thing is the more I write, the more I'm inside and the less I'm out in nature. So I'm not quite sure how I'll manage that. I have a series I'm working on right now about light, and sort of taking qualities of light but personifying it. And I'm trying to do it in a way that doesn't seem derivative of other work. I mean, of course, it's like when you write about love. I mean, pretty much everybody writes about love. How do you do it in a different way? So I'm looking for that. And as I said, I mean, I tend to write about people and relationships. That seems to be just a big chunk of things. So, of what I write. So I'm pretty sure that will continue.
I see. Okay, so that sounds really, really interesting, that, you mean one thing and then, it comes across as something another. And, even in your themes that, you are talking about something entirely different and, it is coming across as entirely different. So I really, really, really relate with you on this. And, I really pray for you to, just continue your journey and just keep writing, because it's really difficult to really get yourself into a zone where you don't know that how are you going to come out of it. Like you spoke about writing nature related poems, and a lot of poets have already done that. So creating your own unique voice, because at the end of the day, no matter how hard one tries, but since we have read a large variety of poets, so something is going to be there. So and in this genre, especially nature or love, everybody almost have talked about it. So really, it's really difficult to carve your own niche, or your own voice into that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I wish you all the very best for doing that, and I really hope to read some of your nature inspired poems someday. Okay, so my next question to you is, how do you draw inspiration for writing?
I try to be observant, and that would be things that I see, connections I make. Sometimes, um, you might see, oh, I don't know, just I can't think of a good example, but something you see or over here, and you go, oh, that reminds me of this other thing. and or oh, I never realized that when this happened it meant this. And so I try to remember those and um, elaborate on them. um, I I try to I pay attention to what I'm uh, reading in other poems, because sometimes I'll think, oh, I didn't realize that this could be, it would be interesting to write about a measuring cup, and yet somebody might do it and it would be really, really interesting. And so that idea that you can write about anything, poems can be about anything, is that's actually hard for me to remember. But it's true. And and maybe to write about these mundane things takes a greater talent. I don't know. um and then of course, big emotions and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of effort to write about something really simple. But I think that uh, based on your way of writing and on your process, I think you should do that, because I think, just a suggestion, I think that's where your your perfectionist side will get to, will get that kick, that okay, so yeah, because you seem to be very somebody really, really, giving attention to detail, and thinking about each and every word and each and every line that you are putting in. So I think you should definitely try that, and I would really love to read, some of your more poems in, about simple things, and your take on them. So that's going to be really interesting. So I would definitely suggest you to please do that.
Thank you, Fizza. The other thing I realized too is just one of my writing buddies does. She just keeps like her daily writings month by month, and so I'm not as I can't do every day. I just haven't. I try really hard, but it never works out. But I just do a free write for maybe 20 minutes, and then occasionally I will go back and look, and sometimes it might have just been just a word play where you change the first letter and you've got all these rhyming words, or I might just have put down a phrase that somebody had said, or a thing that just came to mind that I wasn't really paying attention to, and I'll think, oh, that might be a poem. And sometimes there's enough language that's interesting that I can pick different phrases from that, and it becomes the nugget of a poem.
Interesting. Okay, so tell me about your book. I think it has been recently released. I'm talking about your chapbook, Talk Smack to a Hurricane. So,
Yeah, the release date is September 20. So as of today, the 11th of August, not yet. Um, but and the other thing about it, and I should have updated it in the bio, but we kept adding things to it. So now it's not a chapbook anymore. It got too big. And so I haven't exactly called it a full collection, but I'm just calling it a collection. Uh, it, and But anyway, it's a a book about my mother and mental illness, and it it sort of goes in a chronological order, where the first part is when I'm very young, and then it goes all the way to her death, and she died in 2011. Um, and there's a section in the book that um, is 8 erasure poems, and each erasure is a page of a letter that my mother wrote the day after I was born and mailed to her parents. In that letter, she's very, very happy and talking about my birth and things about me. And she talks a little bit about what's going on in the maternity ward, and there were some practices there that um, for instance, they thought that because of the way they thought staph infections were spread, they only let um, either the women who were roommates had to both breastfeed or neither breastfeed. And it just happened that the day I was born, the only bed available for my mother was in a room with someone who wasn't breastfeeding. So that made the decision for my mother. And in this letter, she mentions that my father had suggested it as being a very good idea if she had been able to do that. And the thing that's really obvious in this book is that my mother and I had this really tenuous and uncertain relationship. And so, looking at it from a personal perspective, I think if my mother had had the opportunity to breastfeed, it sounded like she was interested in doing that, just think how our connection might have been different. And she had not been diagnosed with a mental health condition before I was born. Perhaps that would have allayed that postpartum the postpartum struggles that she had, because we would have had this different or extended physical connection. So that series of 8 erasures um, takes it from when she's first met my father to the point where she is in a psych ward and considering the love between the two of us. So it moves a lot in a very short period of time. The rest of the book are standard free verse poems, and most of them are about my mother and psychiatry, but some are also about choices that I made in my life in reaction to her experiences. And frankly, I have spent a lot of time being mad at just the field of psychiatry. And I think that's probably apparent in some of these poems. Just that feeling of people going to experts, and the experts really don't know because the mind is just so complicated. Um, so and that was part of the impetus for writing these poems. Yeah.
I can completely understand how difficult it must be for you to put out a collection together and write about a subject that is so close to your heart. So I really, really wish you more power, and I really hope that you heal soon, and your mother rests in peace, and you continue to write and just express yourself, because you have a very beautiful voice. Trust me.
Thank you, Fizza.
So yeah. Now, I would request you to read any of your poems that you would like to share with the audience.
Okay. Um, should I read one, two? How many?
As many as you are comfortable with.
Okay. So this one is called The Tutorial, and In it, I'm about maybe 4 or 5, and at this point, it's mid to late 60s, 1960s. The tutorial: plastic bouffant wig for me, Vidal Sassoon 5-point cut for her. Mama tunes out Twiggy, wriggles into girdle, half slip, and bra. We both watch her face in the mirror as she angles white pearl across her lips, dips a little brush in water, then shadow, purples her lids with Mary Quant. Mama slips into the blue sheath, pats powder on her nose and chin, snaps the compact shut. I dig through boxes of Avon samples, inch-long tubes of grease and sunrise, reds, corals, magentas, pink frosts. She spritzes topaz inside each wrist, hers and mine. I want what I can't yet name. I want her glamour. I want her. She pops on white oval shades, grabs the keys to the Corvair, rubs my kiss from her cheek with spit and a thumb.
I really love this poem. The imagery is amazing. It's so vivid. I could actually see all those things that you were describing right in front of me. So, and it must have taken you, a lot of effort, a lot of energy to come up with something like this on a subject that is really, really, close to your heart and, very difficult to talk about. So, it's really amazing that you have been able to put out this.
Um, I'm going to read this one because the title came from this poem. Um, One thing about the way the collection is organized is it's really important to me that people understand that there was a lot of tenderness in our relationship, even though I spent a lot of time feeling angry or worried. I think due to my mother's psychotic episodes, there were moments of abuse. And this poem, you'll hear that in this poem. Talk smack to a hurricane. 1963. I'm 4. Dead president shoving me to the edge of her attention. So I shout, damn it. Then ivory soap in my mouth. Mama sudsing it up good. 1965. She yells, damn it, and slaps me. Don't damn me, mommy, I quiver as her hand turns my head, my heart. Not away from her, never from her, always from myself. Years later, I huddle on cushions at sessions she pays for. The therapist says, let me try something, slaps a pillow over my face. I fling her across the room, storm surge in a hurricane. Now, when I drive the river road, God rides shotgun, spins the story of heaven and hell, twin parties with hungry guests, ready to feast on fava beans and figs, long spoons lashed to their arms. I ask why open palms offer both prayer and pain. Cheekbone remembers one time, 20. Soap can't wash away love burns, no matter how fast the water rushing by or who's in my car when asphalt ends.
I have really no words. I mean, I'm so moved by your poem, and you are so courageous and so brave that you have fought against all the odds, and yet you are here and sharing your beautiful words with everybody. So I really want to thank you for that, for mustering up enough courage. It's not easy at all. So kudos to you.
Thank you, Fizza. I, I'm I'm going to read one more. My mom had Parkinsonisms from taking Thorazine for decades. So, shakes and some balance issues. And she started falling a lot. And one time she fell and hit her head on the wall. It actually punched a hole in the wall. And she was in a small town a couple hours away, and they airlifted her to a hospital here in Columbia. And my father couldn't make it because of the weather, and he asked me to go. So this is called At the Other Hospital. And it was just my mother and I in the room, plus the different medical personnel. At the other hospital, they pass pills in paper cups. No one will gas her with a rubber hand of God. But here surgeons, not psychiatrists, rule the halls. Here white coats spread across the room like fat in a pan. A young one needles Mama's vein again and again, vial after vial of blood for tests. Tubing tethers her body to machines, and her mind straddles barbed wire, the memory of 6 million. At this moment, her bones hold just one doctor's name, Mengele, Nazi. Earlier today, forced transport, shoes, clothes taken. Her fall, a brain bleed, helicopter ride to a city hospital. Falling, her relentless fear. When I was 6 on the down escalator shopping at Prangi's, Mama made me stand in front in case she tumbled. Today, she risks all for me. Today, I know she loves me. A white coat, a Mengele, taps my shoulder. My Jewish mama bolts upright, growls, "You can't have my daughter."
Thank you so much for writing this out and sharing your words. Thanks a lot. I That's all I can say. Thank you so much for trusting me with your words, and everybody who's listening. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my main goal with this book. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. The main goal with my book is to just keep my mom in the world a little longer and pay her respect that I might not have done very well when she was alive. So, yeah. So I appreciate you listening and engaging with me and with the poems. It means a lot. It means a lot, Vizis. So thank you.
My pleasure, and I want to thank you for for sharing your words, your journey with me, because I know it's really not easy for you, but still you did it. So that requires a lot of courage, and really, really, I'm extremely thankful to you. That's all I want to say. I am so moved by your words that I wish I could hug you, but we are so we are poles apart, so I can't do that. So I'll just give you a virtual high five.
High five.
So thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking to you. I absolutely loved and cherished every bit of this entire interview. So thank you so much for doing that. If anybody wants to reach out to you, so could you please share your Twitter handle or your other contact details? So, if anybody wants to read your work or wants to ask you about anything or buy your book, so, he or she can do that.
Okay. My on Twitter, people can find me um, at L Jensen Lampe, and if people want to check my website, it's LynneJensenLampe.com, and it's Lynn with an E at the end. As far as the book, there'll be information about it on my website when it's available for order, but also Iceflow Press is the publisher, and their website is iceflowpress.net. So people can look there. And I think by the first week in September, there will be a pre-order page.
Thank you so much for sharing these details.